Hello, my name is Dr. Keith Palmer, and I serve as the director of the Doctor of Ministry and Biblical Counseling program here at the Masters University. And I want to talk to you today about the importance of having historic models. I've been a pastor for over 2 decades, and I know one of the things that has just blessed me both personally and pastorally as I've learned to grow in my shepherding skills is to see models in church history that we can learn from. And several years ago, I was introduced to a man that I sort of knew because he wrote the hymn Amazing Grace, the man named John Newton. But what I didn't appreciate at the time is that he was an incredible pastoral counselor. In fact, one of the biographers that wrote on John Newton said that he was the leading commentator on religious subjects in Britain in his day, which would be the 18th century, the 1700s. And so I was eager to learn, why was this the guy that everybody wanted to talk to? Like many of you, I was aware that John Newton wrote the hymn Amazing Grace. I had heard history about him being a slave ship captain, and as you know, after his conversion, he ended up mentoring a member of Parliament named William Wilberforce, who led the charge to abolish the slave trade and eventually slavery itself in England. But what I didn't know was that John Newton served for over 40 years as a local pastor. He was ordained in the Church of England. He served at 2 congregations. He did write hymns. He wrote over 1,000 hymns, but what I didn't appreciate was that he also wrote over 1,000 letters of what we would call biblical counseling or pastoral care. What happened was he had this massive conversion after turning away from his religious roots as a child, and he grew in depravity and debauchery. He was involved in many sinful acts, including the slave trade, and then God miraculously and just gloriously redeemed him and saved him and called him into ministry. And when Newton wrote his autobiography, it had great distribution, and it helped people to realize that if God can save somebody as wicked, or as the hymn says, a wretch like me, right? Save someone like Newton, then maybe there's hope for me. And so his biography was distributed. People learned about his history, and they wanted to come hear him. And as they heard him and interacted with him, they wanted to ask. They wanted to ask him for advice about various issues in life. In fact, people would write to him and say, "Mr. Newton, I'm going through this situation. Will you help me?" And he began writing personal letters of pastoral care back to people. Eventually, some of those letters were so popular, they were distributed, and then some of them were even published. And so within a few years, you have dozens and dozens of people writing to Newton seeking pastoral care. So that's something of what his ministry was like. In fact, he said that he believed that he could do the most for God in ministry through his letters. He really felt like that was the way God had gifted him to care for other people. So I was drawn to him because of that influence and because of getting to know this. But I was not prepared for what I learned once I discovered the letters of Newton. Newton had this theology of suffering, this biblical doctrine about trials and difficulties. And that doctrine of suffering, that sufferology, if we want to call it that, really formed a backbone to his overall theology. That is, suffering became something of an on-ramp through which he could minister to other people about things like God's sovereignty or Christ's sufficiency or the utility of scriptures to help people in their need, and any number of theological topics. So one of the things that he emphasized with people is that suffering is actually a disguised mercy. Just to give you some examples of this, Newton, of course, is leaning on 2 Corinthians 12 and other passages like that where the Apostle Paul, you'll recall, is dealing with a thorn in the flesh, and he asks God 3 times to take it away. And God responds and says, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is perfected in weakness." And Newton picked up on that, trying to help hurting people to see that their suffering is actually a disguised mercy. It's an opportunity for Christ's power to be displayed. So just listen to one example here. Newton writes, the believer's faith upholds him under all trials by assuring him that every dispensation, that is every happening in life, is under the direction of his Lord, and that chastisements, those difficulties in life, are a token of his love, and that the season, measure, and continuance of his suffering are appointed by infinite wisdom and are designed to work for his everlasting good, and that grace and strength shall be afforded him according to his day. So you see how Newton is using that friend's trial to help him to see God is sovereign over that trial, that God is appointing every component of that trial for that person's good and for their everlasting glory. And So that was one way that Newton really helped me to see how to care for people, by using a perspective on suffering as a means to connect people to other biblical truths that will be a comfort and an encouragement to them. Another way that Newton really helped me as a biblical counselor is he just reminded me that how we say things, the words we use, the tone we use, the analogies, the illustrations, all of those things are a key part of ministry, not just the content. We remember what Paul told the Ephesians in chapter 4, verse 15, that believers are to be speaking the truth in love. And in another place later on in that chapter, he talks about speaking according to the need of the moment, that it will give grace to those who hear. And I don't know that I've met anybody today or in church history that did that better than John Newton. For example, one of the men that he ministered to for over 3 decades was a man named William Cowper. Cowper was also a hymn writer. He struggled with depression his whole life. He had multiple suicide attempts, and Newton befriended him and walked with him for years and years through his darkness, through his struggle. And the manner in which Newton cared for Cowper was such an encouragement to me. Listen to just some of the ways that Newton cared for Cowper and his choice of words. Your letter drew tears from our eyes, but there is a pleasure in the tears of friendship, especially when we sorrow not as those without hope, and can perceive not only the dark cloud, the difficulty, but the hand that guides it, and which will in due time remove it. Newton writes, I have an assured hope of as bright an hour which will make you abundant amends for all that you have suffered, though you have suffered very much, and I who have sympathized with your grief shall be a sharer in your joy. So we can hear in that the comfort, the encouragement, the pointing to Christ, but he's doing so gently. He's doing so in a way that's measured and encouraging. Just one other my favorite quotes from Newton to Cowper. He writes this. He says, and as to you, the Lord is rich enough, and eternity is long enough to make you full amends for all that his wise plan requires you to suffer here. And again, his compassion, that theological perspective that there is an eternal reward coming, and as we look to that eternal reward in a similar way as Peter tells his audience in 1 Peter chapter 1, Newton says to Cowper that eternal inheritance, that hope of a future inheritance, will give us the grace we need to endure the trial here that we're experiencing. Maybe one other thing that really has helped me as a counselor, what I've learned from Newton, is just the importance, the necessity, the foundation of seeing Christ's sufficiency for counseling. Newton would say it like this, that we should resign all to him. That is, everything that we have, whether we're going through a trial or not, whether we're dealing with a difficult counseling case, that we want to lean on Christ alone and on his sufficiency. Again, listen to Newton. He writes, if every event, great and small, is under the direction of his providence and purpose, and if he has a wise, holy, and gracious end in view, to which everything that happens is subordinate and subservient, then we have nothing to do but with patience and humility to follow as he leads, and cheerfully to expect a happy issue. The path of present duty is marked out, and the concerns of the next and every succeeding hour are in his hands. How happy are they who can resign all to him, to see His hand in every dispensation, meaning in every situation, listen to this, and to believe that He chooses better for them than they possibly could choose for themselves. And that's what Newton has done for me, not just pastorally, not just as a biblical counselor or professor, but just as a man striving to walk with God, that God is calling us to resign all to Christ and to trust Him and to lean on Him in every situation, and knowing that when a trial emerges or when our plans are frustrated or an unexpected pain comes to life in the form of a relational conflict or an unexpected illness, to believe that our Heavenly Father is wise and gracious and good, and as Newton says here, that He chooses better for us than we would choose, and to rest in that and to trust that. And what great hope and what great encouragement that brings. So I hope that John Newton will become a friend to you as he has become a friend to me, and that we need men and women from church history to demonstrate in actual life, in their own ministerial experiences, what it means to put theology into life and to practice the very graces that we know the Bible teaches.